Alright guys, today we're going to talk about the Terminator franchise. So Terminator as a franchise is one of the most beloved franchise globally. I'm not going to talk about all the other spin-off of Terminator because primarily there's only two Terminator that's very popular. There's Terminator 1 in 1984 made by James Cameron, and the follow-up to that, Terminator 2, again made by James Cameron. Alright, so why I picked these two is because these two movies are considered one of the pioneers of science fiction movie and still considered one of the best movie ever made. Right? So we start off with 1984, where we first get introduced to the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger, because at that time he was very popular. He just came off of the movie called Conan the Barbarian. Okay, and why James Cameron picked it was, he was just going through the casting and he figured that Arnold comes off as a very intimidating figure, and with his accent, Austrian accent, he figured he could play the role of a cyborg very well. And why I'm picking Terminator as the topic of discussion today is because everybody's talking about AI, right? I personally have been kind of up to, observing the AI evolution from a very, very long time. So the Terminator takes the topic of AI and kind of gives you what the future holds for AI, and it's now coming true in some sense. Let's see how it unfolds. So in 1984, this is a very fictional character, the T800. That's the cyborg machine, half human robot played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. So basically, what happens in 1984 is that there is this character called Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton. So this story takes into consideration that what if AI evolves in such a way that it starts taking the things that we humans typically do, right? We see machines kind of taking over these days, be it from a job standpoint, be it from the production, the camera crews that you guys are doing. A lot of technologies gets involved, right? So it's just that AI has now kind of evolved in such a way that everybody's talking about AI. So in the Terminator franchise, what happens is that there is a scenario where AI comes to life. Because there was this company, if I were to compare it in the real world, say, let's take Apple or say Boeing for that matter, right? So Boeing, say, manufactures a lot of military equipments, but one fine day they just realize that AI has evolved so much, let's put a brain to the machines, right? There's already brains in the machine, but this is far more superior brains, the AI brain, right? Artificial intelligence. So Cyberdyne is the fictional character, the fictional company. They create a project called Skynet. So one day Skynet says that I don't need any more human intervention. I am far more superior than humans, right? So rather than me taking orders from humans, Skynet says humans should be eradicated from the world because they are useless, basically. So a revolution happens. There's an uprising against man versus machine, right? So the war happens in the future. And there's this character called John Connor. John Connor is going to be basically the future son of Sarah Connor. So Skynet believes that if we kill John Connor in the past, maybe John Connor will not be there in the future, and hence the Skynet or AI will be able to rule the world, right? So they send this cyborg played by Arnold to kill John Connor before he's even born, right? So what happens is he comes to the future, he comes to where Sarah Connor lives. He basically looks at all the phone directory looking for Sarah Connor, and he starts killing one by one all ladies named under Sarah Connor. Simultaneously, the rebellion of the future sends another protector for Sarah Connor, played by Michael Biehn. I think the character name is Kyle Reese. He's a soldier, he volunteers, he wants to save it. So both of them comes into the future. This is where you get introduced to a concept called stop motion also. I mean, there has been stop motion in previous movies also, but this is where it takes a little bit further, right? And this is all the brainchild of James Cameron. So James Cameron, when he was just fresh out of a very successful movie called Piranha, he wanted to produce and direct a science fiction movie, the Terminator. And how he was conceptualizing was, one day he was having fever, and he just realized in the movie, in his dream basically, a robot was chasing him. So he said, why make a movie out of it, right? So it all started from a bad dream. And then now coming to the movie, what happens is that James Cameron was given a very small budget, okay? So why the producers didn't think that with a small budget you can pull off a sci-fi movie, because I think the 80s, science fiction movie requires a lot of big budget. So he was given, I think, roughly about $4 to $6 million to make this movie. So James Cameron, when he first conceptualized this Terminator, so he said, we are gonna make, say, on top of the human skin, we're gonna put what we call as human tissue, right? So the robot is like, his skin is basically all human tissue. It grows old. And also another reason why they choose the human skin is because if you were to infiltrate the rebellion, you can pass off as human being, right? Another fun fact, this also gives a lot of idea to one of your favorite characters called Wolverine from your Marvel universe, right? Because Wolverine, his skeletons is all metal, outside is flesh, right? So the movie kind of sets off where Kyle Reese is trying to look for Sarah Connor, and then Terminator is looking to kill Sarah Connor, right? So as this cat and mouse kind of starts, Arnold, since he's from the future, what they say is when you time travel, you cannot bring anything in your body, be it clothes, metal, so they all come to planet Earth naked, basically, in the time travel portal. Then, as Arnold is trying to kill people, right, he goes to a gun shop. He asks the owner, hey, I want the Uzi 9mm, the 12 gauge shotgun. And the gun owner says, hey buddy, you know your guns very well. And once he has chosen all the weapons, he says, the owner says, how do we, pay? And Arnold says, he just kills it and send it. The owner says, you can't do that. And Arnold says, wrong. And then he just shoots the owner, right? This is where, you will see that in the entire movie, Arnold has about 19 lines in the movie, right? So just a very stoic killing machine, right? They say that with zero error of failures, right? So Kyle and Sarah Connor, basically, they meet. And if you notice Sarah Connor's character, right? If you have followed the Terminator franchise, Sarah Connor, the first character of Sarah Connor is a very goofy, doofy, lovely a waitress, right? Like full feminine character, right? Because this is where we want to show the character arc, how someone so fragile can become so strong in the future, right? So Arnold, I think the model number was T800. That's the model. So he gets, he starts looking for Sarah Connor. He's coming closer one by one, killing all ladies called Sarah Connor, right? Then the police starts figuring out the pattern, and Sarah Connor is basically in the police station, saying that nobody's going to come into this police station. There's about 30 people over here. But Arnold, basically, the T800 reaches the police station because he finds out that Sarah is over there. I think there was a mistake that Sarah did. Sarah called up her friend saying that, I am in the police station. That's basically the Terminator figured out where Sarah was hiding. And that's where also I got to introduce to a music genre called tech noir, right? So tech noir is, it's very techno club music, right? Which is something, again, one of my favorite genres, which is for another day. But coming to the movie, so Terminator finds out where Sarah Connor is basically, being hidden, and in the movie, the T800 asks the police station, is this where Sarah Connor is living right now? Do you have it in custody? The police doesn't give too much detail, saying, yes, how can I help you, buddy? And that's where the final, the famous line from the Terminator says, right, I'll be back, right? So the Terminator comes back, kills the entire police station, everybody over there. Kyle and Sarah Connor, for some reason, they escape, and then they make love, okay? That's where we realize that.
So Kyle is basically the father of John Connor.
So the Terminator, being a killing machine, right? He starts searching for Sarah Connor. Kyle says, no, we gotta prepare. So they make some very crude makeshift bombs to kill the Terminator because they can't carry weapons. The cops are looking for them all over the place, and they want to keep a low profile. So as the Terminator is chasing Sarah Connor, they come to a factory. I think the factory is owned by Cyberdyne, right? That's a coincidence. But if you notice all the Terminator 1 very closely, because people barely talk about Terminator 1, people always talk about Terminator 2. Terminator 1 is where you see all this foreshadowing, right? Where things that will be appearing in Terminator 2, you will see all the hints of that in Terminator 1, right? So they come to the factory, Arnold chases it, Kyle puts a bomb in the torso of the Terminator, it explodes, Kyle dies, right? And you will see the Terminator still crawling on the floor and then trying to kill Sarah Connor. Sarah Connor basically uses a compressed machine and kills the Terminator. And over there, if you notice, the Terminator lends out the arm to kill Sarah Connor, but that's where the machine the compressed machine kills it, and you will see the hand being stuck out, right? This was a massive, massive success in terms of movie making. Small budget, very good movie making, and that's where the studio kind of believes, saying that if James Cameron can do so much with a little budget, what can he do, right? So fast forward to 1991, I think after 6-7 years, right? The studio was like, you know what? The first Terminator was a huge success. How much money do you? I mean, I'm sure I'm just making it up, but the producers were saying like, what's the budget? Terminator. I mean, like James Cameron must be saying like X amount of money, and the studio must be like, yes. I mean, like even if they ask for $1 billion, I think they must have just given it, right? So Terminator 2, now they have James Cameron have like tons of money to experiment whatever he comes in his mind, he can explore, right? So Terminator 2. Same technology you will see in the beginning of the movie, where Terminator is basically back in the present situation. You will see a fireball, right? In the fireball, when they travel through this machine, the detail of the movie, this is where I started loving Terminator, right? And especially James Cameron's direction. The fireball basically cuts through metal, right? And when you cut through metal, you will see, the glow of the metal, how precisely everything is cut, right? So you're guessing now, another Terminator, another savior would be sent to basically, if Terminator is there on the present situation, there'll be another Terminator sent to, protect or kill Sarah Connor, right? So this time, Sarah Connor is no longer the target. John Connor is the target, right? John Connor is just a kid. I think the movie portrayed in such a way that John Connor was a teenager, a very notorious, kid. And Sarah Connor, because she was talking so much about the future, how the Terminator will kill us all, people thought she's going crazy, and she was put in an asylum, right? In Terminator 2, now this is where again people remember this everywhere, right? The Arnold is coming through a club, and then he looks at a person, he measures everyone height, shape, body, right? And he looks at a guy saying that, I need your clothes, boots, and your bike, right? And the guy says, you forgot to say please. And then he rubs the cigar on his chest, and then Terminator didn't feel anything. And that's one of the good fight scenes that happen, right? So he takes the clothes, everything, he's about to ride a bike, and then one guy says, hey son, I can't let you get off, right? And that's where, I think one of the most catchy tunes that you can hear, that Terminator, right? So it's everywhere, right? So Terminator kind of sets off for a lot of future filmmakings also, right? Then he's riding the bullet. Suddenly now we see another Terminator appearing. Now this is called the T-1000, an upgrade version of T-800. Now this T-1000 doesn't use any human flesh. It's what we call liquid metal, right? So it can turn into shapes, anything that it touches, but it can't. So T-1000 basically now lands on the present day, where the T-800 played by Arnold is also kind of diverging on the same target. This time, Connor, right? Sarah Connor, John Connor, right? So John Connor. So what happens is now a cop is basically checking out. There's a disturbance in the area, so the cop just checks out. That's where the T-1000 makes the first kill, right? So he takes the shape of the cop. But you see in the scene that he takes the gun and cocks it, right? Because the liquid metal cannot mimic complex machines, right? So he starts looking for John. He comes to the foster parents' house and says, have you seen this kid? The foster parent says, hey, what has he done this time around? Nothing, he just want to say hi. So basically, John is in an arcade with his friend. They're playing some video games over there, right? So Arnold is basically diverging over there. Then T-1000 is also diverging over there. One of his friend tries to kind of, do a trick to the cop, saying that, when the cop says, have you seen this kid? I think he went that way, but the cop doesn't believe. And then he starts chasing John Connor, right? At the same time, Arnold also just starts chasing him, right? So as they're in the alleyway, that's where, John Connor realized the story that his mother has been telling, right? So he sees the Terminator, he figures that he's about to get killed. Then he says, "Get down," right? Arnold says, "Get down," and then that's where the T-1000 starts shooting, and Arnold shields John Connor, right? So they get into a fight. John Connor runs away. Then he rides on his bike. You will notice over there, I think the character T-1000 was played by, I think his name was Robert Patrick, right? So Robert Patrick back then was also, a very good sportsman, a very fast runner, right? So James Cameron, I heard it in one of his interviews saying that, Robert Patrick was so fast that basically they had to make John Connor, played by Edward Furlong, drive the bike much faster because Patrick could just kind of chase him, right? So that's where we start the chasing going on, and then Arnold starts also chasing. That's where he's driving his Harley Davidson, right? So over there, the character T-1000 takes a bus. It's basically a truck, and start chasing John Connor, right? If you notice, like I said, if you observe the Terminator 1 franchise, you will see that that truck was basically a toy in the first series. Now it becomes a full truck, right? That's what the foreshadowing that I wanted to kind of highlight. So as they're chasing, the truck rams into one of the bridge, breaks it. We thought that nobody would survive this, but then again, the T-1000 kind of emerges from the fire, right? Glowing and taking that mercury shape, right? So John is saved by Arnold, and then he says, time out, I need to process what's happening. And that's where John Connor realized that he's been sent to protect him, and Arnold will do basically anything what John says, right? So John tries to test if Arnold's gonna follow all the orders. So he says hey, put your one leg up, and then Arnold does that, right? So he's so happy, Arnold's gonna do whatever he says. While this is happening, Arnold was trying to basically stop John from screaming or something, and he was screaming saying, "Save me!" And two guys comes over there saying that, "Hey, what's the problem?" And that kid being a punk, right? So he says buzz off or something, and then one of the guys says, "Hey, you little a kid," curses, and then John says to Arnold saying that, "Can you just hold this guy?" And then Arnold lifts that guy just by holding his hair, right? And Arnold tries to kill that guy. So John tells Arnold saying that you cannot go on killing anyone. And he asks Arnold again to promise. And Arnold gets confused what's promise and all. He just said you can't just go on killing people on the city, right? So Arnold swears, he won't kill anyone. Then they say they gotta warn their mother and they're gonna save it. Arnold is saying, let's not save your mother because the T-1000 is already there. Most probably your mom will be dead. Same time, Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor is trying to escape from the mental asylum, right? So she tries to escape. She makes a really good escape plan. She's escaping, and then as she's escaping, right, Arnold appears. And then she gets shocked because, the future again she's seeing, whatever happened in the past, she's seeing again happening again. She freaks out, and all the people over there at the asylum, tries to take control of Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor, and Arnold keeps marching, right? And then John Connor says, "Save my mother," and he starts throwing people here and there, and that's where all the other people at the asylum sees the T-1000, right, passing through cage, right? Everybody is shocked, right? It's just that you will see also the gun basically gets stuck in the rail, right? That's one of the beautiful moments of that movie. So they escape. They have a firefight. They escape, and then as they are escaping, Sarah tells to Connor saying that you can't risk your life even for me because you're very important for the future. So there's a little crying moment here and there. And then Arnold, as they take a rest, trying to help stitch Sarah Connor, says, do you know what you're doing? Arnold says, I have a detailed file of the human anatomy. That's where even if you, in the modern context, is very important because as an AI, what happens is whatever we're fitting in the system, computer, we're typing every day, how do I lose weight, what do I eat, I'm having bone pain, all these are absorbed by machines, right? So they understand. So what in the movie also says that having a proper anatomy file of the human body makes them a very efficient killers, right? The T-1000 is now searching, approaching. Now, Sarah Connor says we gotta prepare. So now Arnold is being taught by John, how to be more human, right? That's where Sarah Connor gives a monologue saying how much a machine can learn from a human being. Is that we humans want to destroy each other, right? Whereas machines are more human than us human, right? So that's where Sarah also realizes that she sees a little bit of glimpse of the future, what could happen, right? So a nuclear explosion happens, everybody's melted, right? But then again, she started, as they're preparing for weapon, and also there's another good scene over there, a shot, right? Where in the first movie, they tried to replicate what we call as a minigun. Minigun is basically a Gatling machine gun, right? They didn't have the budget, so they couldn't bring that gun. Now they have the budget, now they see basically the actual gun, right? So it's a very expensive gun, by the way. So what happens is, now Arnold is happy, smiling smirk on his face the moment he sees the M60 mini machine gun, right? Sarah Connor thinks that, if she kills the person responsible for the project, maybe they have a chance. In modern context, let's look at it this way. If I kill Sam Altman right now, maybe OpenAI will not take the world. That's a thought, right? Don't do this at home, okay? So now, Sarah Connor looks for this guy. Basically, I forgot the name of the person, but you guys can look it up. So basically, he's a chief engineer that basically develops Skynet project, the AI project, right? So Sarah Connor tries to kill that person. Somehow he manages to escape, and John Connor and Arnold reaches the spot. And this is where and I think this gets engraved to a lot of kids' first time watching Terminator, right? So John Connor says to the kid of the engineer, saying, let's go to your room, show me how your room is. And Arnold says, no, pay very close attention, right? So he takes a knife, cuts his hand, rips off his skin, and you will see the exoskeleton, the robot arm, right? First second, as human beings, we get shocked, but that's where, the engineer, I think his also name was Kyle or something, I forgot, right? So he realized that he has been working on the same project for a long time. That's where Sarah explains, and he says, the technology that they found from the first technology was so superior that they got so much obsessed with the technology. So this is what the problem with technology is, right? That when you get too obsessed with it, it becomes smarter than you. Right? And that's where the current AI thing is going right now. So he says, if we have to destroy this, we have to destroy whole file. And whole file is all in the Cyberdyne headquarters. So they make a plan, they go to Cyberdyne, and they, ask the cops to, let us in, and the cops obviously for no reason, for obvious reason, doesn't allow them in. And they says, they tie him, and then another cops starts looking for him, and then realize, oh man, these guys are here. And then they said, the cop says, the guy from the TV is here, send everything you got, send the cops, and send everything. That's where all the cops, the police, everybody starts diverging on Cyberdyne's headquarters, right? So they start putting explosive in the entire building because they want to destroy all the proof of the technology. That's where, the cop starts raiding the place, and Arnold says, he's gonna get a look, and John says, but you can't go outside. And Arnold says, his famous one-liners, right? Trust me, right? So he starts shooting at the cops, and you will see that casualty rate is 0.0. Like nobody was harmed, nobody got hurt. And then as he's kind of wrapping up, they're also wrapping up, putting all the bombs, the cop starts entering the building, right? That's where, if you put a close observation, one of the SWAT officers over there, played by Din Norris, you guys will know him from Breaking Bad. So that was one of his first, prominent movie that he got. And there's a internet joke over there saying that he got kind of promoted and went to find Heisenberg. I don't know, that's a joke, okay. So they start raiding the place. The engineer gets shot, right? So, and that's where, he's painting, saying, I don't know how long I can hold this. His breath stopped, and then everyone's like, get out of this place, right? So he stops breathing, drops the detonator, the whole building explodes, and, cops are saying this is a war zone over here. And Arnold, starts looking out for an exit plan, right? Because they have to get out of Cyberdyne, right? That's where T-1000 is basically closing in, right? And then there's after they escape from Cyberdyne, a chase happened between T-1000. He's riding a helicopter, and that's where you'll see some of the best shootouts, car chases, happening. And then they go back to the same factory from the first. That's why I keep saying, observe the first movie. It's just that movie was made in 4 million budget. Now you have unlimited budget. So the kind of demolition that they have done, the kind of things they have destroyed must be in like millions and millions of dollars, right? So they go back to the same factory. That's where the T-1000 Terminator is fighting. For some reason, we thought at one of the scenes the Terminator has died because the T-1000 stabs, and then the Arnold shuts down, right? And in the end, T-1000 is mimicking Sarah Connor, right? So John Connor thinks that it's the actual Sarah Connor, and Sarah Connor says like, "Hey John," she starts shooting with a shotgun, right? And then as the shotgun bullet runs out, Arnold kind of comes up, the hero moment, right? Slowly comes from the conveyor belt, shoots that one, I think the 40 millimeter round that he had, explosive grenade. It explodes, T-1000 falls in the molten, molten lava, melts, screaming. And they all think that it's over, now this is done, and Terminator says there is still one more chip left, the chip in his head, right? So he says it has to be destroyed, right? So everybody, John is crying, "No, you don't have to do this, I order you not to do this." So John says like, "It must be done." Terminator says it must be done, so he starts lowering down. And as he gets submerged in the molten metal, he gives that thumbs up, and this is where men cry, okay? So this is where the only scene in the comment section, this is a scene where men cry, right? And then that final thumbs up happen, movie comes to a close, and this opens up a lot of door to the future franchises, which are terrible in nature, right? But the good thing about, key takeaway from this movie is, I want to mention another director called Gareth Evans, right? So Gareth Evans makes Raid 1, very few budget, fantastic concept. If your first movie is a great success, the studio will just pump you money, right? So all I say is, whatever you're doing your first project, put your heart into it, make it original. There will be buyers. All right, thank you.